Hello everyone and welcome to video number 30 in our survival game series done by Brackeys. I'm the CEO of Brackeys, and in this video we're gonna take a look at a much better method for doing weapon switching than the one we had before. So we are basically gonna create a whole new script which is gonna take care of stuff like being able to switch weapons using the scroll wheel and also the different numbers on the keyboard. And so we can have more than just two weapons that will toggle on and off. So that's really exciting. And let me just quickly show you this drawing I made just to show the basic functionality of the script we are going to be making. So it's basically split up into two parts. The right hand side inside of the square here and the left hand side. And over here we're going to be changing a variable, and this is just going to be changing a number, and we're going to do that depending on the scroll wheel and the button or the number buttons. And over in the left hand side we are going to enable and disable different weapons depending on that variable. Okay, so let's go through this rather quickly. The variable everything is depending on is the current weapon. And that's going to range from 0 to the max weapons. So the maximum number of weapons we want to carry. So if we set the max weapons to 2, we're going to be able to carry 3 weapons because the current weapon will go from 0 to 1 and to 2. And we're going to be able to add onto that or subtract from that using the scroll wheel up and down input. Or we are going to be using the input.getKeyDown 1 equals 0, 2 equals 1, 3 equals 2, and so on. If this is not clear to you yet, it hopefully will be. It's a little bit confusing with all the numbers and so. Okay, so once we have this current weapon variable under our control, we will send it over to another function called selectWeapon. And this will basically find the children of our melee object, so find all of the different weapons parented to that object. And then it's going to assign numbers to each weapon. So the first one is going to be 0, the next one is going to be 1, and so on. Then it's going to search through and disable all the weapons that doesn't have a number that matches the current weapon. Once it finds the weapon with the number that matches the current weapon, then it's going to enable it. Then it's going to check if the weapon is actually a weapon or if it's just fists. And so if it's just a fists weapon, so you don't want the animation to play a swing animation, but instead want it to play a punch. Or this could also be the case for different kinds of weapons. If you want daggers to have some sorts of animations and swords to have others, then you can check here whether or not it's a sword, whether or not it's a dagger. And if it is, it's going to enable the weapon on, meaning that we're going to play swing animations. And if it's not a weapon, we're going to disable the weapon on, and so it will play punch animations. And you can have the same principle going with different kinds of weapons. But to keep this simple, we'll just have the weapon or not weapon. Okay, so as always, I've opened up Unity, and you can see we have our arms set up here as always. And under the player, you can find them under our main camera, and there we have the arms 05. And if we just go through the rig or the armature, we will find the empty game object holding all of our weapons. So under our arm armature, go to master, inner arm right, and again you don't need this complete rig. You can of course get it from our website for free, but you can also just have any kind of empty game object and parent weapons to that, but in our case we have it inside of this rig since we wanted to follow the animation of our arms. Okay, so under the hand right, the hold right, and then the melee, we have our different weapons. So this is where we want to create the new script. So go to add component, and then new script, and let's call this weapon switching 02. And whoops, I've already done that. I'm just gonna do test after that, but in the assets pack it will be called 02, and the language is going to be JavaScript. Now hit the create and add button, and we can double click it to open it up in MonoDevelop. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to rename the function start to function awake, and we are going to use that later, so for now we can just keep that. But I will space out the bracket keys. I just like it this way. I think it keeps it more organized. Okay, so let's first declare some variables. And two we are going to be needing are the current weapon and the number of weapons. So let's type var current weapon equals 0 by default. Then a new one, var, and let's call this max weapons, and it's going to be equal to 2 by default. And remember, whenever this is 2, the maximum number of weapons we're going to be able to carry is going to be 3, because we count the 0. Okay, great. We are also going to need one last variable though, and this is going to be the animator. And that's because we want to access our animator controller, if you have one. We have for this series, and we want to be able to set the controller, tell the controller that we have a weapon equipped or that we don't. And so we want the animator. So type var the animator of type animator with a capital. There we go. Actually, let's make that one decapitalized. Great. So now in the function update, we want to create the part where we change the current weapon. So inside the function update, we'll write if input dot get axes. Oops. Get axes. And then open parentheses, mouse scroll wheel. Like that. Remember the capital letters, it's very important. Close parentheses is less than 1, or 0, sorry, is less than 0, then we want something to happen. What we want to happen is we want to say if current weapon plus 1 is less than or equal to max weapons like that, then we want something to happen again. So there, and that is current weapon plus plus. So the current weapon should be 1 more than it already is. We could also say plus equals 1. If the current weapon plus 1 is less than or equal to max weapons, we want to add 1 to the current weapon. If not, so else, we want the current weapon to be 0. Current weapon equals 0. And then a semicolon. And under here, we will type, whoops, let me just make sure I get this right. So under the else statement, we want to type select weapon current weapon. And the select weapon is the name of our function where we will actually select the weapon and disable all the others. And we want to send with it the current weapon variable. So all of this is not something I'm going to go into too much detail about because it's really hard to explain. But basically we're just making sure that when we bump up the scroll wheel, it will add 1. And when we bump it down, it will subtract 1. And it's going to do this as long as it's inside the max weapons range. And so under this if statement, we want to type else if input.getAxis mouse scroll wheel is bigger than 0. So if we are scrolling the other way, we want to do something else. And here we want to check if current weapon -1. So we are really just reversing the process, is bigger than or equal to 0. Open up the bracket keys, current weapon minus semicolon. So that if we don't get the if the mouse scroll wheel is less than 0, we want to add on to it, and if it's more than 0, we want to subtract from it. So if the current weapon -1 is less than or is more than or equal to 0, we want to subtract. Else, so here we're just making sure that it won't go below 0. Else, the current weapon equals max weapons. So it will loop that way. So whenever we get below 0, it will jump up to the maximum amount. And so we can just keep on scrolling through. And a semicolon. Okay, so if this was confusing you, it's completely understandable. It was confusing me when I just started out making this type of logic. But I just thought that we should put this in our game because it's really a much better way to do things. So after the else statement, we type select weapon. Again, we are calling the function current weapon. There. Okay, so that's it for the scroll wheel part of things. Now we are going to make sure that it will loop correctly and so. So after the else if, you're going to type if current weapon is equal to max weapons +1 in the parentheses, and inside of the bracket keys we're going to type current weapon equals 0. So if the current weapon is 1 bigger than max weapons, it should be 0. So if it exceeds the max weapons amount, we'll loop it back to 0 and we can keep on scrolling. And then we're going to type another if statement. So if current weapon is equal to -1, and then the bracket keys, then we're going to type current weapon equals max weapons. So if it gets below 0, it will loop back to the max weapons amount. Okay, so that's all we're gonna do for looping and so on. Now we should actually be able to play this and have it work. Except we just need to add the function, but for now we'll just have no logic inside it just to test if things are working. So go down, type function, and we're gonna type, let's call this select weapon. So select weapon. And we are taking some input, and let's just call this input index. That's just a standard name for the for an input number, and it's going to be a type integer. And now we can just close off the bracket keys, not typing in any logic yet. So save that. Let's head into Unity and see if we get any errors. It looks like we are error free. And we have some new variables here. So if we hit play now and scroll up, the variable will start changing. And if we scroll down, it will change the other way. So we can scroll and it will loop just like we want it to. And you can of course reverse the mouse scroll wheel by just changing this sign. So if we change this to bigger than and this to smaller than, then we have reversed the scrolling effect. So if we hit play now and I scroll the other way, whoops, selected the wrong object here. Hit play now and scroll the other way. Now when I scroll up, it goes to 2. So it adds on, and when I scroll down, it subtracts. Okay, great. So now let's go back in here and let's create the function that will allow us to just press buttons in order to press to change weapons. So make some more space in the update function, and let's type if, and this is really much more simple. Let's type if input dot get key down, and then open up parentheses key code dot alpha 1, and the alpha 1 is basically just the numbers that are not on the keypad on your keyboard. So just the basic numbers on top of all of the letters. And we want the alpha 1 and not the alpha 0 because that's just standard for shooters. So remember that. Okay, so let's close those off and open up some bracket keys. Whoops, I'm making a lot of typos, but I can't see the keyboard because of the huge microphone shoved in my face. So sorry about that, but we'll continue on. So if we press the 1 key, we want the current weapon to be equal to 0. And we want the select weapon to be called with the current weapon variable. Else we will only change the number and not call the function to actually change the weapons. And remember, you have to create as many of these if statements as the maximum number of weapons you want. So if you want 3 weapons to be the max, you'll have to change these if statements. So create if statements for that number. So if input dot get key down, get key down there, key code dot alpha 2, close it off. Then we want the current weapon be equal to 1. And we again want to call the select weapon with the current weapon also. And now you can just go ahead and duplicate this down below adjust it to so it fits. This should be alpha 3 and this should be 2. And now we should be good to go. So let's go inside of Unity and see if this is working. So I hit play. And when I hit the 2 key, it changes to 1. When I hit the 3 key, it changes to 2. And when I hit 1, it changes back to 0. And I can again still adjust this using the scroll wheel, which is what I'm doing now. And so you can really get some nice results and have the player use the method he wants. Okay, awesome. So now we want to actually call the weapon switching stuff. But I can see that this is turning out to be quite a long video, so I'm gonna cut it off here, and we'll take care of that in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know this was quite difficult stuff, but I'm sure you will understand as we go forward. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.